I told myself I wouldn't look at the clock. Looking at the clock is an admission of something. I don't know what, exactly, but it feels like losing. So I didn't. I watched the rain instead, painting my windowpane in shaky, silver lines. Then the lock clicked, a soft sound that was somehow louder than the storm. She came in on a gust of damp, cold air, smelling of night and petrichor. Eleanor. She shook out her umbrella, a simple black one, beaded with rain like shattered obsidian. Her movements were always like this, economical, graceful, with a quiet finality. She didn't see me at first, standing in the archway of the living room, shrouded in shadow. I watched her. I'm good at that. Watching her. She shrugged off her coat, and the deep blue silk of her blouse underneath clung to her shoulders, just slightly damp. A single, escaped strand of her dark, precisely styled hair was plastered to her neck. She reached up to loosen the scarf at her throat, and her fingers, long and capable, trembled just for a second. It was the only crack. The only sign that the composed, mid-40s gallery owner, who had just hosted another flawless opening, might be made of something breakable. You're still up. Her voice wasn't a question. It was a statement, low and a little rough from an evening of talking to patrons. Couldn't sleep, I said. It was only half a lie. Her eyes found me then, adjusting to the dim light. They held mine for a beat too long, the way they always did, as if she were trying to read the fine print on my soul. You should have gone to bed, Leo. It's late. So is you. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I had things to finish. So did I. We stood there, 5 feet of expensive Persian rug between us, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock I'd sworn not to look at and the relentless whisper of the rain. She took a step forward, then another, not towards her bedroom, but towards me. She stopped by the sofa, her hand resting on the back of it, her knuckles white. Was it a good night? I asked, just to say something, to break the silence that felt thicker than the night outside. It was, successful. Her gaze dropped to my hands. You've been sketching. My charcoal-smudged fingers were a dead giveaway. I'd been trying to capture the way the light hit the rain on the glass, but all the lines had somehow curved into the familiar slope of a shoulder, the patient line of a neck. She moved then, closing the distance. Not to me, but to the coffee table where my sketchbook lay open. She didn't ask to look. She just did. Her presence was a warmth at my side, the scent of her perfume, jasmine and something earthier, like sandalwood, cutting through the smell of the storm. She leaned over, her hip brushing against my arm. A static shock, a jolt of pure heat, passed through the thin fabric of my shirt. Her breath caught. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible hitch. She was looking down at the page, at the dozens of quick, desperate studies I'd made. Not of the rain. Of her. The curve of her ear, the focused line of her brow as she read, the way her hand cradled a coffee cup. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, her body so close I could feel the residual chill from her skin. Then, slowly, she reached out and her fingers, cold from the outside air, brushed against mine where they rested on the arm of the chair. It was the briefest contact. A punctuation mark in the dark. She pulled her hand back as if burned. The front door, which she had closed but not locked, suddenly blew open with a violent gust of wind, slamming against the wall with a crash that made us both jump apart, the spell shattered. And in the doorway, silhouetted by the hall light, stood a man. The man in the doorway was David, Eleanor's ex-husband, looking windswept and theatrically concerned. Ellie. I saw the light on. The storm's getting worse, and you left your phone at the gallery. I was worried. His eyes, a practiced shade of sincere, flicked from Eleanor's startled face to me, still seated in the shadows. The calculation in his gaze was instantaneous. The boy. That's what his look said. What is the boy still doing here? I'm fine, David. Eleanor's voice was a sheet of ice, all vulnerability from moments before sealed away. You didn't need to come. Of course I did. He stepped in, dripping on the floor, his presence an invasion of the quiet world we'd built in the late hours. He was her age, all polished confidence and implied history, a reminder of a life I had no part in. I stood up, my sketchbook forgotten. I should go. Leo, don't. Eleanor's command was quiet but firm. It wasn't a request. It was a line drawn in the sand against David's unspoken dismissal. David's smile was thin. I'm sure Leo has his own place to be. It's past midnight. That was the taboo, right there. Not just the years between us, but the spaces we were supposed to occupy. He belonged in her past, in her world of gallery openings and late-night concerns. I was the 24-year-old art student she'd hired to help with installations, the one who supposedly belonged in a cramped dorm room, not in her elegant, rain-soaked house after dark. I was just leaving, I repeated, my voice tighter than I intended. I moved to pass her, my shoulder brushing against hers. I felt the tremor run through her, a tiny, seismic event. She didn't move away. Her hand came up, not to stop me, but to rest lightly on my forearm. Her fingers were warm now, no longer cold from the rain. The touch was a brand. Thank you for waiting up, Leo, she said, her eyes holding mine, ignoring David completely. Her gaze was a fortress, and for a second, she let me see inside the walls. It wasn't about the sketchbook, or the rain, or the time. It was about not being alone. It was about choosing who you let see you in the quiet, unraveled moments. David cleared his throat, a sound of pure annoyance. Eleanor's fingers tightened on my arm for a single, pulse beat of a second before she let go. Get home safe, she whispered, the words meant only for me. And in that suspended moment, with the rain hammering a frantic rhythm against the windows and her ex-husband standing as a monument to a life she'd left behind, the air between us crackled, alive and undeniable. She had chosen my side of the line. The silence after David left was heavier than before. The door clicked shut, a final sound, but the echo of his presence, of his judgment, lingered like a stain. Eleanor didn't move, her back to me, her shoulders a tight, straight line. I should have gone. I knew I should have. But my feet were rooted to the spot, held there by the ghost of her touch on my arm. She turned slowly. The composed mask was back, but it was fragile, hairline cracks visible in the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I'm sorry about that, she said, her voice carefully neutral. It's fine. It wasn't. He just assumes. She wrapped her arms around herself, a self-conscious gesture I'd never seen from her. He assumes I need looking after. Assumes he still has the right. And do you? The question was out before I could stop it, reckless. Need looking after? Her eyes snapped to mine, wide and startled. The air in the room shifted, growing thick and warm. She took a step toward me. Then another. The 5 feet of Persian rug vanished until only a breath separated us. I could see the faint freckles dusting the bridge of her nose, the subtle pulse at the base of her throat. Leo. My name was a whisper, a confession and a warning all in one. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I could feel the heat coming off her body, smell the jasmine on her skin, see the conflict warring in her dark eyes. Her gaze dropped to my mouth. This was it. The precipice. Every cell in my body leaned toward her, a magnetic pull I had no hope of resisting. Her hand came up, hesitant, and her fingertips brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. The contact was electric, a jolt that stopped my breath. Her fingers trailed down, skimming my temple, the line of my jaw. Her touch was unbearably gentle, a question. I saw the fear then, right beside the want. The fear of what this meant. The fear of his judgment, of everyone's judgment. The fear of being the older woman with the young man, a cliché, a scandal. The fear of ruining the fragile, quiet understanding we had built. Her breath hitched. My head dipped, my lips a mere inch from hers. I could almost taste her. A sharp buzz shattered the moment. We jerked apart as if scalded. Her phone, left on the coffee table, lit up with a text notification. David's name glowed on the screen. She stared at it, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The spell was broken, replaced by a stark, cold reality. But when she looked back at me, her eyes were not full of regret. They were full of a furious, defiant longing. She didn't move toward the phone. She moved closer to me, her hand finding mine in the space between us, her fingers lacing through mine, holding on tight. The text from David glowed between us, a stark, unwelcome anchor to a world that felt a million miles away. Eleanor didn't even glance at it. Her eyes were locked on mine, the defiance in them burning away the last of her hesitation. The air was so charged it felt difficult to breathe. Her fingers were still tangled with mine, a hot, solid point of contact. She didn't let go. Instead, she used her grip to pull me closer, just an inch, but it was enough to erase the last safe distance between us. He thinks he knows me, she whispered, her voice raw. He thinks he knows what I need. What do you need? My own voice was rough, scraped bare. She shook her head, a slow, desperate movement. Her free hand came up, her palm resting flat against my chest, right over my hammering heart. She could feel it, the wild, frantic rhythm that was all for her. I'm twice your age, Leo, she said, but it wasn't a rejection. It was a confession of her own shame, the social calculus that screamed this was wrong. I don't care. The words were simple, absolute. My hand, of its own volition, lifted. I watched, mesmerized, as my fingers brushed against the escaped strand of hair still clinging to her neck. I tucked it behind her ear, my knuckles grazing the delicate skin there. She shuddered, a full-body tremor, and her eyes fluttered closed for a second. When they opened, they were swimming with a vulnerability that shattered me. This is a terrible idea, she breathed, even as she leaned into my touch, her cheek pressing against my palm. I know. We'll ruin everything. I know. We were a breath apart. I could feel the warmth of her exhalation on my lips. The scent of her, jasmine and night air and woman, was all I could process. Her hand slid from my chest to the back of my neck, her fingers tangling in my hair, pulling my head down gently, insistently. Every rational thought, every fear, every warning from the world outside this room, dissolved into a single, white-hot point of anticipation. Her lips were parted, her gaze dropped to my mouth. This was it. The point of no return. My other hand found the small of her back, pressing her flush against me. A small, helpless sound escaped her throat. And then, with less than an inch between us, she went utterly still. Her eyes, wide and suddenly terrified, flickered over my shoulder towards the window. Leo, she breathed, her voice a ghost of a sound. There's someone outside. The spell shattered. The warmth of her body, the scent of her, the electric anticipation, it all vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp dread. We broke apart, my hand falling from her face, hers from my neck. The loss of contact was a physical ache. Where? I whispered, my voice hoarse. She nodded, a barely perceptible motion, towards the large window facing the street. A shadow. By the oak tree. It moved. My mind raced, painting worst-case scenarios. David, lingering, suspicious. A neighbor. A stranger. It didn't matter. The result was the same, the intimate, stolen world we'd built in this room had been breached. We were on display. I moved to the window, keeping to the side, and peered through a gap in the curtains. The rain had softened to a drizzle, the street glistening and empty under the hazy glow of the lampposts. The oak tree stood, its branches casting long, shifting shadows in the wind. Nothing. No one. There's no one there, I said, turning back to her. But the damage was done. She stood in the center of the room, arms wrapped tightly around herself again, looking more exposed than I had ever seen her. The fear in her eyes wasn't just about a possible peeping Tom. It was a mirror of the fear I felt curdling in my own gut. The fear of being seen. Of being judged. Of this fragile, impossible thing between us being exposed to a harsh, unforgiving light. He was right, wasn't he? She said, her voice hollow. David. This is reckless. Foolish. She gestured vaguely between us, a space that now felt like a chasm. What are we doing, Leo? This was the moment to back away. To agree. To let the shame and the fear win. To let the world outside this room dictate the rules. I crossed the space between us, not with the slow, tentative steps of before, but with a single, decisive stride. I stopped so close that our shoes almost touched. I could see the pulse hammering in her throat, the faint tremor in her lower lip. I don't care who was out there, I said, the words low and fierce. I don't care what David thinks. I don't care about any of it. Her eyes searched mine, wide and uncertain. You asked what we're doing, I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. I reached out, not to pull her to me, but to gently untangle her arms from where they were locked defensively across her chest. I held her hands in mine. They were ice cold. We're choosing this. Right now. We're choosing us. I saw the war in her eyes, fear against longing, reason against desire. She looked down at our joined hands, then back up at me. A single tear escaped, tracing a slow path down her cheek. She didn't pull her hands away. Instead, her fingers tightened around mine, a silent, desperate answer. The tear was a catalyst. It wasn't a sign of weakness, but of surrender. The last defense falling. I lifted my hands, cradling her face, my thumbs gently wiping the wetness from her cheeks. Her skin was impossibly soft. She leaned into the touch, her eyes closing, a shaky breath escaping her lips. Eleanor, I whispered. It was the first time I'd said her full name without a title, without a barrier between us. It felt like a prayer. Her eyes opened. The fear was still there, a flicker in the depths, but it was no longer in control. It was overshadowed by something older, more powerful. A raw, aching need that mirrored my own. This is real, I said, the words a statement, not a question. This, between us. It's real. She nodded, a slow, deliberate dip of her chin. I know. Her voice was thick, but steady. I've been trying so hard not to see it. Trying to pretend you were just, a boy. A helper. A distraction. And now. Now, she breathed, her hands coming up to cover mine, holding them against her face, I see you. I see the man who waits in the dark for me. The one who isn't afraid of my silence. The space between our bodies hummed with an energy I could almost taste. I could feel the warmth of her through my clothes, smell the faint, clean scent of her shampoo. Her gaze dropped to my mouth, and this time, there was no interruption, no shadow, no fear to pull her back. I'm not going to be your secret, Eleanor, I whispered, my forehead leaning against hers. I'm not going to be something you're ashamed of. I'm not ashamed, she said, and the conviction in her voice was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. I'm terrified. But I'm not ashamed. That was all I needed. All the permission, all the confirmation. I closed the last, infinitesimal distance. The kiss was not gentle. It was not a tentative exploration. It was a collision. A release of all the weeks of stolen glances, of charged silences, of hands almost touching. It was desperate and hungry and messy. Her arms wrapped around my neck, pulling me closer, her body molding against mine as if trying to erase every inch of separation. My hand slid from her face into her hair, dislodging the elegant twist, and she didn't care. When we finally broke apart, gasping for air, the world had shifted. The room was the same, the rain was the same, but we were irrevocably changed. We stood forehead to forehead, our breath mingling, our hearts pounding in a frantic, synchronized rhythm. She looked at me, her lips swollen, her hair a beautiful mess, her eyes clear and certain. "Now what?" she whispered. A slow smile touched my lips. "Now," I said, "we find out what happens next." The frantic energy of the kiss settled into a deep, resonant hum. The world didn't end. The floor didn't give way. The only sound was our breathing, slowly returning to normal in the quiet room. The ghost of David, the shadow at the window, the weight of every "what if," they all receded, leaving only the solid, undeniable truth of us. Eleanor let out a soft, watery laugh, her forehead still resting against mine. "Well," she breathed. "That certainly clarifies things." I smiled, my hands sliding from her hair to her shoulders, feeling the tension there finally begin to uncoil. "Just a bit." She pulled back just enough to look at me, her gaze tracing my features as if seeing me for the first time. The hesitation was gone. In its place was a warm, weary acceptance. I spent so much time being afraid of what this would look like to everyone else. The older woman, the young man, a cliché. And now? "Now," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I don't care what it looks like. I only care what it feels like." She took my hand, lacing her fingers through mine in a way that felt both new and deeply familiar. "And it feels like coming home." I brought our joined hands to my lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. It was a simple gesture, but it held the weight of every unspoken promise between us. The promise to be seen, to be chosen, to be real. We didn't need to say anything else. The grand declarations had been made in the silence, in the space between heartbeats. I led her to the sofa, and we sank down into the soft cushions. She curled into my side, her head finding its place on my shoulder, her hand resting over my heart. I wrapped my arm around her, holding her close, feeling the steady, solid rhythm of her breathing against me. We sat like that for a long time, watching the rain finally cease, leaving the world outside the window clean and new. The age gap, the doubts, the outside world, they were still there, but they no longer defined us. They were just details in a much larger, more beautiful picture. We had crossed the line, and on this side, there was only warmth, and the quiet, certain peace of being exactly where we were meant to be. Did you feel the tension between Leo and Eleanor? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Let us know in the comments.